think we can kick off, Eliza and Liz, so let's get going. Well, firstly, hello everybody. I'm delighted to welcome you to the HK45 Virtual Fireside Chat series. I'm Kieran Sanghera, one of the HK45 co-chairs. Thank you very much for joining us today. The HK45 Virtual Fireside Chat series aims to showcase female talent in arbitration, and today's chat is the second of 6. I must say, identifying our first 6 guests proved to be a remarkably easy task. There's female talent everywhere. We just need to recognize and showcase that talent. The virtual aspect has facilitated that exercise enormously, as we can go far and wide to find our senior female practitioners. In fact, the list is much longer than 6, so please stay tuned as we add guests to the series. One point I want to highlight about this series is that we really aim to showcase the breadth of experience across diverse jurisdictions, and also to share diverse stories in the hope that each of us can be inspired by or relate to some aspect of the experiences that are shared. There really isn't one answer to what talent looks like in arbitration, nor is there one answer to what it means to be successful. So that's really what we're aiming to showcase here. It's a huge pleasure for me to introduce our second guest to the series, Liz Chung, Head of Corporate, External and Legal Affairs at Microsoft Korea. Liz has had an interesting career. She spent time as a judge in Seoul, then a distinguished career in private practice at the law firm Kim & Chang, and today she's in-house counsel leading the legal team at Microsoft Korea. Also have the pleasure to introduce our moderator for today, Eliza Jiang, a registered foreign lawyer at Fangda Partners based here in Hong Kong. Eliza herself has a fascinating background, straddling both Latin American and Asian cultures, and I look forward to interviewing Eliza in the years to come. But for now, I'll hand over to Eliza and look forward very much to hearing from Liz. Thank you again, all of you, for joining us here today.
Thank you, Kieran. Hi, Liz.
Hello, Eliza, and thank you, Kieran, for that really wonderful introduction. It's really exciting to be with HK45 in the comfort of my own home.
Yes. Thank you, Kieran, for the introduction. So it's a pleasure for me to have this chat with you, Liz. As Kieran mentioned, you have had a really interesting career spanning from the judiciary to private practice to now being in one of the most important tech firms of the world, Microsoft. So in this session, we'll have different topics that we'll discuss, and I will invite everyone in all of the attendees to make the session more interactive, to raise your questions in real time. So I will headline each group of questions ahead of time. So as we enter into that group of questions, and then you can post your questions in real time, and we'll try to make the session more interactive rather than leave the questions towards the end. So that's a slight change from, I think, what we've done before. So Liz, let's start with your early life and your early career. What was it like? What was your upbringing like? You know, your childhood, your early life. Did you have strict parents?
So I'm the eldest of 4 girls, and back when I was young, the preference was to have a son in Korea. So much has changed since then. So I think my mom had a bit of a hard time raising 4 girls, but both of my parents were very, I should say, progressive in some way, that they were happy to have 4 girls, although I think they kept trying to some point in having sons. But raising girls to study hard, to go to college, to get jobs, to become career women. So, and especially my father encouraged me on that path. As you can maybe see or hear from my accent, I spent some years in England. My British friends say my accent is all gone now because of the US influence.
Yes.
But some US friends say I still sound a bit British. So
Yes.
I spent twice, like 3-year periods, 2 3-year periods in UK when I was young. So meaning parts of primary school and parts of high school. So I say to my friends that I've been in the hot tub, in the cold tub, going back and forth, UK and Korea until I entered college in Korea. At that time, it was a huge kind of culture shock for me, coming back from London, actually. So in the UK, I was in an all-girls school, a very progressive headmistress. You're going to the leaders of the world, so to speak.
Oh,
and then I come back. And then I entered almost all-male college, very, very dominated by boys, men, no women professor. And suddenly I'm a really big minority. So I think I felt more like a minority in my own country than when in the UK. So that there was a bit of adjusting to do. So I feel I've been into this culture and that culture, and I guess it's similar with you as well. But that's kind of a brief summary of my early days, so to speak.
Okay, so you had a very international upbringing then.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at my age group in Korea, I think I was, one of the lucky ones to really experience Western culture firsthand.
Did your parents have any sort of expectations for the 4 girls, to enter certain kinds of profession, or you were expected to excel academically?
Yes.
Yeah.
Definitely. And my father, I think, never really kind of pressured me to become a lawyer or study law at college, but I think he kind of steered me in a very quiet way. On hindsight, it was like he had his plans.
Right. Yes. Like parents do. Yeah.
Exactly. But even, during the later kind of secondary, like grade 11, when you really think about what you're going to major in college, law was not really on my top list. But my father, I think, told me, if you want to become a professional in Korea, if you want to keep working in Korea, then you really need to have some sort of a license, like a medical doctor or a lawyer. Professional, exactly. And back, and I feel really old saying this, but back in the days there weren't that many female role models like in the corporate world. Women, very exceptionally, brilliant women, they were expected to leave jobs when they have children. There was definitely a big concrete ceiling, not even glass ceiling. So it kind of made sense to pursue that career if you really wanted to work. And I tell this to my girls, and they say that is like crazy. You don't become a lawyer to be able to work. But that was, that was like that. It was like that a few decades ago. I'm afraid.
Yeah. It was your license to access the workplace, so to
Exactly.
say, back then. Okay, and you have two girls of your own now, so you're instilling the same sort of teachings that your father, similar.
Not so similar, I think. So it's like, okay, so I kind of chose a career and which luckily I really grew to love. But you cannot really choose a profession or a career just because you want to work. Right now, it's a different world, so to speak. So it's like you do whatever you want to do, keep alive your passion. So I don't really want to steer them in any particular way.
In any direction, okay.
No.
Yeah, even more progressive. Aligns with the times. So aside from back then, when you were in law school, what kind of law student were you, and what was the environment like? Because I can imagine it would be very sort of different. I did law school in North America, the US and Canada. So I imagine that at that time in Korea, being one of the very few female law students in a predominantly male environment, that must have been very interesting. So can you sort of compare and contrast maybe from your first law degree to when you were doing your LLM at Harvard? So how, you know, what was the environment like?
Well, two environments were very different. So in the early 90s, predominantly male, no male professor, about 5% were women. So I think, you know, I became a bit shy going back and forth, right? So you need to adapt, you need to learn the language, you need to make new friends. So that kind of makes you more reserved and kind of makes you more observing than really putting you out there. So I think the college years made me more like that, because it was, I was definitely a minority. And I'm sure a lot of people attending this have read Michelle Obama's Becoming. And one topic or one scene that really resonates with me is that when she says when she was at Princeton, like white dominating culture, and she was only one of very few Black women at the time, just being there required a lot of energy. And that if you kind of ask people, well, you know, push yourself, you be more outspoken, you do this, you do that, there's not that much energy left in you to do that. And that really resonated with me, because it took a lot of energy just to be in that environment. On hindsight, that's how I felt. And fast forward, like how many years, 12 years, and I was at Harvard. 50% women, so many brilliant women professors. It almost felt like a paradise.
Right.
And I'm kind of finally here, right, in the modern world, and I feel so lucky to be in this environment. And I was so happy. And at that time, the first women president was appointed as the president of Harvard University, Dr. Drew Faust. So that was a kind of a milestone for Harvard as well. And Hillary Clinton was running for president. So it was all kind of girl power. But then I spoke to this women professor at Harvard Law School, and she kind of observed my excitement and said, well, you should be more observing in classrooms. Still, girls are less confident. Still, boys are more confident. And if you don't really pick on female students to speak up, the classroom will be dominated by men, by confident boys. Even though if you kind of pick on women, girls to speak, they will give a very eloquent answer, but they just are don't feel confident enough to speak up and raise their hands. And after that, I kind of did observe the classroom behavior, and it really kind of dawned upon me that even at this modern age where you have 50% of women, you have these brilliant women from US and across the world at Harvard Law, still men are more confident. So it was like a kind of a new awakening for me that we still have a bit of a way to go. But definitely those two experiences were very different.
Do you think that it also has something to do with your sort of cultural background when you were in Harvard? Did you find that there was a difference between you know, where people were from, like, you know, if the women were from Asia versus if they're from America? Was there a cultural difference on top of the gender differences?
I think there was, to some extent. The LLM program is so diverse. You know, you have so many people from everywhere, and it was a really, really great, safe environment. For example, you know, people from Israel made friends with people from like other Arabian Arab countries, which you cannot really do in real life. And the school grounds made everything very safe. But I also noticed that in the US, especially with the JD students, they were really, really focused on US, you know, like very internal looking, whereas a lot of LLM students were very outward looking, like beyond their country, beyond their jurisdiction. So that was a bit of a difference that I noticed, but I think it was a very safe place to be. Okay.
Well, that's in contrast to your time in studying in Korea. And then so after Harvard, you went back to Korea, is that right? And then you entered judiciary?
That's right. Well, actually, so that was during my time at Kim Chang, the law firm. Actually, the firm sponsored my studies at Harvard, which I'm ever more grateful.
That is, yeah, that's very generous.
Yes. So I became a judge before then. So after college in Korea at that time, you pass the National Judicial Examination and you go through this 2-year mandatory course at the Judicial Research and Training Institute. And then you can basically become a judge, a prosecutor, or private practitioner. And so at that time, I was lucky enough to have some options. So I decided I would start out my career with the judiciary, and I ended up at the Seoul Central District Court. And after 4 years, I decided it was the right time to turn to private practice. And then after a few years, that's when that Harvard opportunity came.
Okay. So what was that? What was it like in your early career as a young, member of the judiciary? Also, when it comes to gender diversity, did you have to assert yourself and work harder than your male counterparts? What was it like back then in the judiciary?
I mean, at the time, I didn't feel like I was, I mean, by the time I got to the judiciary, I've been a minority for so long, since college. Yeah. It wasn't anything new to me. But, looking back, there were less than, I think I was like number 100 of female judges out of like 1,500 judges altogether. So still less than 10%. And we hadn't had any women Supreme Court justices, no chief judges. So women were mostly concentrated in the kind of the bottom ladder. So unlike in the US or common jurisdictions, we had a career system of judges where you become a young judge and then you kind of go up the ladder, and the ultimate kind of goal is to become a Supreme Court justice after like 20, 30 years of service. So definitely there were not many women role models, but I think because there were so few women, you really stuck with one another, right? You kind of, it was a bit of a sanctuary when you got together with women judges and talk about life, work, kids. So that was a bit of a safe harbor for me. And I'm still in contact with many of the women judges back then, yeah.
Okay, that's great. Did you feel that, the litigants were, like, did you feel that you were treated equally that as your male counterpart, as, since you are a judge is a judge is a judge. So was there any? There
was definitely dual standards, I think. So if you're a woman judge, you're very respected. And it doesn't matter if you're a bad judge or a good judge, right? You're a judge, and that status is given. And even if you're a young woman, at least at the kind of outset, there is some respect shown to you. It doesn't mean that respect is given to all women. Right. And I've seen people really kind of treat their women colleagues badly in front of me, but they're very respectful to me. So there was that kind of a bit of a dual standards. And I think the big challenge came when I joined the firm, although it was the biggest firm in Korea, and I really didn't have to kind of earn my earnings or get cases to sustain myself. I really felt that now I'm done with that your honor status, and I'm just one of many, many lawyers, and I really have to work hard to prove myself, and especially to the clients. And all the decision makers within the companies, they were all men, right? And you seldom met women clients, at least in my early stage of law firm life. So dealing with the clients, getting respect from the clients, I think that was a bigger challenge than when you were a judge.
Okay. So, well, now that's a good segue to go to talk about your prior practice at Kim and Jen. So you already alluded to the fact that there wasn't a lot of gender diversity back then, where you also, again, the minority, a part of the minority group of sort of female lawyers at the firm. In general, we have oftentimes, diversity is a very important topic, and we discuss that oftentimes in panels like this, in panels, in fireside chats, and in chats with arbitrators, and in the arbitration community is very important. To you, why is the conversation around diversity important? Like fundamentally, why is that? Why do you think that is the case? Is it because, more diverse arbitral panels make better decisions, or is there a perspective that women provide that is, different from their male counterparts? Like, what is the fundamental importance when it comes to diversity in arbitration, international arbitration?
Yeah, that's a long question. Fundamentally, I think diversity is really, really important. Diversity and inclusion are very important in many ways. Definitely, I think the results are, I believe, would be fairer, would be the right decision, basically. Maybe there is no like one right decision, but if I could say, righter, and there's a higher chance of you making the right decision if you have a diverse panel, and if you have, a diversity. I mean, I think I can speak from my own experience. I thought our team, Kim and Chang, was very good because we're very diverse. Meaning, we had like men and women. We had like lawyers like myself, who's basically Korean judge, but also had some exposure to the West. We had Caucasian lawyers, English, French, German, American, and even if the law is the governing law is the Korean law, if you have a pool of arbitrators, mainly from common law jurisdictions, how you make your arguments, how you plead your case, really is I think it's an art, right? And by discussing these topics and explaining the Korean law aspects to my common law, to my colleagues from common law jurisdictions, it really, I believe, added a lot of substance and values. My colleague would tell me, Korean law is crazy. Nobody would understand that, right? And then I try to explain, it's not crazy. We come from this context and from these facts and from these precedents. This is, how it works, and making it explainable to my common law jurisdiction colleagues was a very good benchmark of how the arbitrators would take in that argument. And how you make an argument, I think, is really important aspect, the advocacy aspect of international arbitration. So having those discussions internally, drafting your pleadings and arguments and making oral presentations, it was a kind of a work from a very diverse team. And ironically, we were in Seoul, where it's really not very diverse, but our team was thankfully quite diverse. And also arbitrators as well. It's so much difficult to explain issues if you have like not a diverse panel. There's just one view, right? And you have your set of arguments, you have other company or other individual making arguments, and you're coming from all types of different jurisdictions with different legal cultural backgrounds. Like Korea, a Korean company can have a dispute with a South American company, and you have lawyers from South America, from Korea, maybe from global law firms, maybe witnesses coming from other jurisdictions. And just to have like a panel of arbitrators with exactly the same background, that I don't think doesn't make much sense. Yeah. And it really doesn't give that trustworthiness, right? You have to have the trust within the system to be able to keep on using it, right? So I think it goes the integrity of the arbitration, long-term sustainability, and in order for international arbitration to keep going amidst a lot of competition from local courts, international courts. There's a lot of competitors out there right now.
Yeah.
So I think that is very important. And I think a lot of arbitrary institutions have taken the right step forward, but there's still much more to be done.
Yeah. What are some of the things that you can do? Well, since you're in Korea and your experience is as a Korean lawyer, what do you see that the firms there, maybe aside from Kingdom Chen, other firms or including Kingdom Chen can do to enhance or improve their policies when it comes to recruitment of gender diversity?
A lot to be done.
Thanks.
I think, for one, there needs to be a lot of empathy among the senior leadership team, which lack a lot of women. And I'm not talking about a specific law firm. It's kind of, I think, it's basically similar everywhere. Maybe one firm is doing better than the other, but still. And how, and as I alluded earlier with Michelle Obama's book, there is a lot of energy going in just to be there, right, as a woman. But you don't just want trophy women. They really do add value to your business. And now you have increasing, for example, women in-house counsels who are saying, well, we want to see more women representing our matters, right? And we want to see more diversity because we're not comfortable in having just one view. We want to have a diverse viewpoint so that we can make a decision in the right manner, right? We don't want to make a wrong decision. And the leadership may kind of understand it intellectually, but I still kind of have doubts whether they really feel it. And I think a lot of listening should be done from the women lawyers inside the firms, and really a learning mindset that what can we do for you because you bring value to the firm. And that kind of sincerity, really open and transparent communication builds trust, and it would help the firms retain women lawyers. I find, a lot of firms say, oh, should we introduce flexibility? Should we introduce this and that? And that's all good. But then they say, well, then if we do that, male lawyers will complain. Male associates will say this is more of an affirmative action and it's not fair because now there are so many women, etc. I think those kind of specific tools come later. I think you really have to understand the situation. You have to really see the value of diversity, and you will need to persuade and the people who are not really have bought in yet. Right? You have to have the buy-in from male lawyers, colleagues, and then specific tools can come in. And then I think, you may have more creative ideas than what's already out there.
Right. Yeah. No, that is definitely very important. It's not just implementing the policy, but just have the buy-in, which is extremely sort of foundational to implementing these policies. Maybe switching gears a little bit, we can talk about your in-house transition to in-house position. So one of the questions that we hear often is, if you specialize in something sort of niche like international arbitration, is it easy to transition, or is it easy or hard to transition into a sort of general corporate in-house role in a company? So, and how did you find that transition for yourself?
I think there is definitely that perception that where if you're kind of only involved in very limited practice, and international arbitration is quite unique, that it might be difficult for you to transition to a more general role, and there is that concern, definitely, I think. And one reason that I thought this might be my last chance was that I had like 16 years of experience, right? So then after, if I kind of continue with international arbitration practice for a few more years, then the doors may not be open anymore. So there was definitely that concern on my part as well. But you know, when I was at the firm, I didn't only focus on international arbitration. I did a lot of investment type of work, compliance, crisis management. So it was actually quite broad, although they were like all of them in the bit of a dispute bucket, so to speak. And now coming in-house and transitioning, I find the skill sets that I learned doing those, engaging in those practices are really helpful. Because as in-house, I kind of jokingly say I do everything but international arbitration.
Yeah.
So it's a whole array of issues, right? And I cannot even begin to explain what I'm doing, because it's just, there's like so many matters popping up here and there, and there are more long-term issues, short-term issues, and a whole array. But you know, being in dispute, you would know every case is different. Every case has crisis moments. Every case has unexpected issues coming up in the middle. And I think those situations and the kind of training you get dealing with those crisis moments actually help you deal with these crisis moments as an in-house. So I actually think the skill sets that you learn as a dispute lawyer is very helpful. But if you're too focused in your area for too long of a time, it might kind of be seen as a bit of a negative than positive if you want to pursue kind of more general roles.
So now in this role is sort of very broad, right? It's corporate, external, legal affairs. So just pretty much everything under the umbrella. So it's not true that once you move in-house, it's more relaxed than prior practice, right? It's a myth.
No, definitely not. No. And I wasn't actually looking for a relaxed role either, right? I wanted to do something different. And I think a lot of people kind of were surprised when I made that move, because Microsoft didn't particularly have a lot of international arbitration cases. I think it's kind of similar in all tech companies, right? They're not really kind of known to be engaging in international arbitration cases.
Right.
And I knew that for some time I might not be doing any international arbitration, but the whole purpose of moving was to kind of broaden my horizon, learn about new areas, learn about technology, and I think the corporate external, those words coming before legal, is very significant, because a lot of my work involves corporate and external affairs. And you know, with this AI, everybody's talking about AI, big data, cloud, digital transformation, and especially amidst coronavirus situation, it's becoming even more important to transform. And it was an exciting opportunity for me, because it was actually kind of not handling, so to speak, back-end issues like disputes, which arise from transactions that happened 3 or 4 years ago. But you're coming in the front end, where you're actually kind of shaping policies and regulations. And everybody was talking about fourth industrial revolution. And I really kind of wanted to find out what that is and how that would affect our profession, our daily lives. And that opportunity just came up when I really needed it. So I'm kind of thankful for that transition. But even though I'm not really engaged in international arbitration, there are, like, as I said, disputes. There are like crisis moments. You have to make decisions one way or the other. And I think the training that I got and the experience I had with dealing with many cases, different international arbitration cases, have really kind of prepared me to take on that role.
Okay, so the message is like for the younger practitioners is nothing is like we're not pigeonholing ourselves in terms of if we decide to specialize in international arbitration, because a lot of the skill sets and the crisis management mode we can sort of exercise it in-house. Context.
Yes.
So particularly with technology, I have a particular interest in tech companies. I love technology, and I have.
I think you may be more tech savvy than I am.
Well, what are some of the things that you've learned at Microsoft that you found to be particularly interesting in transforming sort of the world as we know, and especially now in light of the pandemic situation? So, what is the role of a company like Microsoft?
Yeah, I'm kind of conscious that we're using Zoom right now. But without Microsoft Teams, I don't think we would have been able to survive the last few months and continue with our work as if there is no interruption or disruption. And I think technology, like this is a really good example, the HK45 initiative. Who would have thought that I would be able to have a chance to have a chat with you without actually flying to Hong Kong, right? And the other like fantastic women speakers that you have in line from like Europe or the US. It's such a great opportunity that the technology has enabled, right? And I think technology can make, it's a bit ironic that we're all kind of stuck at our homes right now, but it can make people more inclusive. So for international arbitration, there was a perception that it's not very transparent, that, there's this mafia, like you have to know the right people, you have to have the connections. Whether it's true or not, there was that perception. But with these webinars, with these events opening up to virtually everyone who can attend and participate wherever they are, it gives a chance for the system to become more transparent, open, and inclusive. And I think technology, if you use it in the right manner, then it can become a very, very strong tool in actually furthering diversity and inclusion.
Yeah, that is. It seems like we can be at our homes, but then be more connected to the people that we haven't been in touch with for some time, and in the same way. So technology has facilitated that. Well, as long as there aren't any AI technology that is threatening us as lawyers to replace our role, then we're good there. As long as it's helping us to remain more connected and more diverse as a community, that is definitely positive. So I am mindful of the time that I had a couple more questions revolving around, just shifting gears again, revolving around mentorship and advice for younger practitioners. So can you tell us a little bit about your experience, both being with mentorship, as being a mentor, perhaps maybe with the most recent one, and then as a mentee, maybe back when you felt like you were a minority? How did you find a role model for yourself?
Mentoring, I think, is much more difficult and challenging because you constantly want to think about what the mentee is in need of, whether you can really provide the right advice. For me, I've been a mentee for a long time, just because there wasn't so many role models in the international arbitration space, especially in Korea, in Asia. When I was, I think, our generation is like the first generation of women lawyers to actually join big firms, right? And do a lot of corporate finance dispute work at big firms. Before my generation, they were mostly judges, women judges or prosecutors or solo practitioners, mainly dealing with family law issues like divorce, children, and so forth. And so my generation in Korea, at least, was like the first generation of women lawyers who got into big law firms. And especially in international arbitration, we were just like the first generation, right? Full stop. There weren't that even many male role models either. And so I really found mentors from like London, in the UK, Hong Kong, Singapore, so many women who were actually really wanting to help you out. And I was very touched. Like, I don't even practice in the UK, right? So I'm in Seoul, Korea, and I meet lawyers in the UK, women lawyers, and then we talk and we connect instantly, and they really feel for you and they want to help you out because you don't have a lot of people, women, to talk to in that field in Korea. And so that was really helpful. But also there were limitations because they're different, from different culture, different background. So that, you know, I think you have to really, you cannot find everything from a couple of mentors, and you learn from everyone, basically. So I think having many like mentors, like not only women, if you're a junior woman, but like male mentors, and not only in your jurisdiction, but outside of your jurisdiction, I think that would be helpful. And when mentoring, I think it's more helpful if the mentees really know what they want to get out from the mentors. It's like, just mentor me, like, without giving you a bit of any context. It's a bit difficult because you may not be able to connect, and there is this generation gap as well. And so and if you really want to kind of, so Liz, I want to talk about A, B, and C, and I want to know how I can do this, or can you kind of help me to get to this goal? I think being more specific would be helpful.
Yeah, so that you answered the question. I was going to ask you, how can we be better mentees? So being specific about our goals and really thinking before reaching out to people who might be potential mentors about that. And that would,
I think that would be helpful, yeah.
Yeah, that would be. We have a question from Amanda Lees in Singapore. What do you miss about leaving prior practice, and what do you not miss? Not in the cat. Not miss about leaving prior practice.
Amanda, we need to have a separate drink on this. What do I miss? I miss the people.
From prior practice, okay.
From international arbitration in general. Because like I find like I'm kind of out of international arbitration bubble, and now I'm in like AI data bubble. So kind of skipping from one bubble to another with different sets of people. You know, having that kind of solidarity and collegiality, because we worked as a team. I think that's what I kind of miss. I mean, for in-house as well, you have a team and you have collegiality and solidarity, but because everyone has different roles, it's not always exactly the same, if you know what I mean. I mean, if you have different roles, different hierarchy and different jurisdictions. And you know, what I don't miss is building time, definitely.
Yes.
Timekeeping.
The necessary evil.
You don't have to think about, you know, how much I can bill for this. When you can study subjects that are not really related to you can spend like your time in a more flexible way. I think that's what I do.
And that's good. And you can spend some time learning about, you know, the technologies and the cool things that Microsoft are doing. So I envy you for that. So that is one part that is great about working in tech. We have a question from Yoko Maeda. Wow, could I ask your plan for the next 10 years?
Wow, that's a big question.
Maybe top, how will you approach this?
Well, I don't really have a plan for the next 10 years. Maybe I should start thinking about it. But I think, you know, and I think, Eliza, we kind of talked about this during our kind of prep session, that I find a lot of, and even my children, young people worry too much about the future, right, of what hasn't happened yet. Like, how am I going to deal with children? And you're like a college student, right? And there'll be some years before you get married and have children. Or how am I going to get a job? And my daughter is like a high school student, and she's worrying about things that hasn't happened to her yet, and it's kind of down the road, like 3-5 years down the road. And I say, well, you know, things are going to change so quickly, and especially, you know, this year, who would have expected we would be in a place like this with COVID? So many unexpected things will happen, and there will maybe more progress than we anticipated. So don't worry about things that haven't happened yet, and don't worry about those things, especially if they're going to kind of hinder you from doing something right now. And I think one should remain ambitious. And I think that's really difficult, because I think it's more difficult for women to be ambitious. You're kind of thankful, you're kind of living day to day, and you're not like dropping dishes and everything is like in a good order, and you don't really have time or the energy to be ambitious. But I think we should spend time less worrying and becoming more kind of ambitious and proactive. That's kind of what I tell myself, which isn't always easy. So for the 10 years, who knows? Exactly. I might go back to international arbitration, you know, who knows?
Yeah, that's a long time horizon to think about. But yeah, so it's important to just remain focused in the present and just deal with things as they come in, and that's great wisdom. Yeah.
If I could just add one thing on that, though, I would like to continuously learn.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, once you kind of stop learning and you just kind of use your knowledge over and over again, that's when it kind of is a red flag. I think continuous learning is definitely what I plan to do for the next 10 years.
That's great. That's a great answer. Okay, so we've reached the end of the session. So I'm going to do something that is a sort of more light and fun, the lightning round. So basically what I'm going to do is just ask you a series of short questions, and the first thing that comes to mind, then you just let me know. And just so everyone knows, Liz has not sent this list of questions in advance. So, okay, ready?
I'm not very good at being spontaneous, but fire on.
Easy, I hope. But you can pass. So if one question nothing comes to mind, just pass and I'll go to the next. So something surprising that people will find about me is? You can pass.
I don't know.
Okay, all right. So if I were stuck in solitary quarantine in a remote island, I must have these two things.
I think I'll need music.
Okay.
And I don't know why, but ice cream comes to mind.
Oh, yeah. That would be mine as well. If you're in an island, it's hot.
I'm sure they're not going to be very helpful in my island life, but
it does not. Yeah, it does not matter. It's whatever makes you happy in that solitary quarantine island. If I could travel in time, I would go to what era or period?
Wow. Can I be a man?
Sure, of course, absolutely.
I don't want to be a woman and go back.
Okay.
Definitely sometime, maybe, I don't know, in Europe.
In Europe, okay.
In Europe.
As a king or something?
I don't know, where, like a center of action. Maybe when, you know, Britain and Spain was kind of dominating the world. I don't know, but definitely I don't want to go back time as a woman. Sorry.
Okay. No, fair enough. And then, okay, maybe the last one. So, favorite guilty pleasure food? What's your guilty pleasure?
You know, it sounds really boring, but bread.
The bread. Okay.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Okay. I thought you were going to say ice cream, but
Yeah, ice cream. I mean, there's so many really, but
there's so many. Okay,
yeah.
great. Okay, well, thank you so much for playing along. That was fun. And I don't see any more questions rolling in. It was a great pleasure, Liz, to be chatting with you on a Friday afternoon. It's a really great way to cap the weekend with an good conversation with you. And thank you again for taking part of this HK45 initiative and Fireside Chat. Kieran, I don't know whether you're online, whether you have any closing remarks.
Well, thank you for having me. It's been really fun talking to Eliza and getting to know you in the meanwhile as well. It's been great fun. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Liz. Have a great weekend. Thank you, everyone, for participating.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.